Good morning and welcome to Future Media Explains, where I break down the biggest stories that will blow your mind. And today I'm talking about breaking news. I'm talking about how Meta just beat the US government in court again, and how it can thank TikTok for not facing a breakup this time round. See, overnight, a judge in Washington ruled and gave Mark Zuckerberg the keys to double down on social media dominance and the future of synthetic AI. And he left the Federal Trade Commission, which wanted Meta broken up, crying in its coffee. So let's get into what's happened here. This was the end of a 5 year investigation, refilings, and legal trench warfare. But the FTC ultimately has lost its big antitrust case against Meta over its acquisitions of Instagram and WhatsApp. The FTC had argued that Meta bought its monopoly and it wanted it broken up. It wanted the judge to unwind the deals, separate Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp into different companies. Instead, the judge, James Boasberg, said, "You may not like what Meta did, but you didn't prove your case." He didn't bless the deals as good for the world. He fully accepted that Meta had the monopoly, but he said that the FTC failed to clear the legal bar for a breakup. Basically, to prove a case in antitrust, you have to prove that the company you're claiming is a monopoly is a monopolist in a defined market. And where the FTC failed was that it argued Meta was in a smaller market competing with Snap and others. What Meta persuaded the judge was that it was a much bigger market with TikTok, Reddit, and YouTube and others. So basically, the outcome of this, what does it mean? Meta gets to keep Instagram, and it needs that because it's the sexy one in its ad suite. And it gets to keep WhatsApp, which gives it global scale and that's about to be flooded with new ads. What does the US government get? It gets nothing. So good news for Zuck and good news for Wall Street. After all, Meta was the fastest growing tech stock last year, up more than 80%. So Zuck gets a green light to keep building his empire. But how did we get here? Let's roll back the clock so we can all remember what happened here. Meta bought Instagram for $1 billion. That was a shock amount of money at the time. Everybody was stunned. But then it bought WhatsApp for $19 billion, and frankly, half the world choked. They scoffed. Too much, Zuck. You've made a terrible mistake. But Zuck, the ultimate honey badger of tech, laughed it off. And 10 years later, he emerged as the winner. Instagram brings cool mobile native videos and photos and demographics that advertisers drool over. WhatsApp has brought simply rocket ship growth and insane engagement metrics. Meta's folded both of these into its magic money making machine in ads. Global advertisers have lined up, and Meta's ad revenue has exploded to $165 billion last year. That's when regulators were triggered. After all, the FTC had approved both of those acquisitions, but suddenly they had a hangover. Hang on, did we just let this guy buy the future? The FTC decided to take that back to court with a simple and, frankly, emotionally persuasive argument. Meta built Facebook, fair enough. It started to plateau, though. So, to buy his way out of trouble, Zuck acquired the very apps that were going to displace him. In other words, he didn't buy growth. He bought freedom from competition, ergo anti competitive. He created a monopoly with money. That's what got everybody into court, including Zuck, who was dragged there kicking and screaming and forced to give 7 hours of testimony, which, frankly, this was the scuttlebutt in court. He was pissed off because it had taken him away from his super yacht on a Norwegian fjord. Those are the problems you have, I guess, when you're a trillionaire. The legal fight, though, ended up being about which market are we talking about, and this is where it got spicy. The FTC, as I said, argued the relevant market was personal social networking. Basically, Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, Snapchat, and a couple of minnows like MeWe. Viewed through that lens, Meta was an absolute stuck on monopolist, a big blue Death Star in the middle of the map with everyone else in its shadow. And for a while in the trial, that story worked. But as it crawled through the courts over 5 years, the market moved. Social shifted from posts from your mates or your aunt's dog's photos into short form video and discovery feeds. And then, boom, in came TikTok. Suddenly, YouTube reacted with shorts. There were algorithmic feeds, Reddit, X, and a whole new rebel alliance of attention seeking rivals started to fight with Meta. Meta spent $4 billion building Reels to compete. Meta's lawyers were back in court arguing, look, we're not a friendly little friends and family market anymore. We're in a global attention war with TikTok and with YouTube. And here's an essential piece: TikTok wasn't just a competitor, it was growing faster and stealing time and advertisers. And James Boasberg, the judge, 6'7", big basketball player, he bought that story. And in his overnight opinion, he said, all of these apps have now evolved into having nearly identical features. TikTok and YouTube compete fiercely with Meta for attention and ad dollars. And if you include TikTok in the market, the FTC's monopoly theory collapses. So here's what then happens. The case failed, not because Meta's a saint. It's very, very far from that. It dies because the definition of the market shifted under the FTC's feet. Now, this isn't happening in a vacuum either, and this is really important to note, because in a different courtroom on a different day, a different judge, Amit Mehta, not that Meta, a different Meta, ruled that Google holds an illegal monopoly over search thanks to all those default deals with Apple and phone makers and browser partners, but he didn't penalize the search giant because America needs to win the war for supremacy on AI, and it's the same here. Where Meta didn't blow up Google, Boasberg didn't blow up Meta either. There's a clear pattern. Courts are willing to say, okay, folks, this is a monopoly, but those same courts are very reluctant to rip up big tech by the roots in a moment when the US is obsessed with staying ahead in AI. And then you need to layer in TikTok again to the drama because it's the shadow that hangs over all of this. Zuck was fighting to prove it faces real competition and TikTok was the biggest threat. But guess what? TikTok is Chinese owned and it's running circles around everybody on engagement. It's gathering data that gives China a foot up in AI. That sent the White House freaking out. Congress passed a divest or ban law forcing TikTok's Chinese parent ByteDance to sell it. Trump and Chinese Premier Xi got together and agreed that forced sale to a US operation led by Oracle and other allied investors, which includes the Murdochs. The outline of this deal is TikTok's US business ends up in a new company, majority control sits with US aligned investors, ByteDance, China, keeps a small minority economic stake and licenses the algorithm, Oracle, Fox, and others host the US data and claims to put guardrails around it. So, back to the Zuck case. When Zuck and his legal eagles walked into the court, they just said, hey, Your Honor, TikTok's huge, it's beating us with video, we're not a monopoly. When it said that, it was doing it against a backdrop where Washington itself had spent 2 years screaming that TikTok was a massive, dangerous rival. It's easy to see how that context will have helped. Okay, so job done. Meta wins. But there's a barb in the victory. This isn't a full exoneration. There's a howitzer still pointed at Meta. In its latest earnings report just a couple of days ago, Meta's CFO, Susan Li, did something very unusual for a company that's on a tear. She warned investors about legal and regulatory headwinds that could significantly impact future financial results. She's talking about a monster lawsuit from 41 US states accusing Meta of harming children. That 233-page complaint alleges that Meta, number one, ran a scheme to exploit young users for profit. Number two, misled parents and the public about the safety measures it was taking. Number three, harvested children's data in ways that violated privacy laws. And four, knowingly shipped changes and updates that made their platforms more addictive for kids and teens. If that case lands hard with big damages and strict behavioral remedies, it could end up having more impact on Meta's business than this failed breakup attempt. So, yes, Meta has dodged a legal bullet, but it's still standing in front of an oncoming truck. So let's round this up once and for all. Meta keeps Instagram and WhatsApp. That locks in its scale across messaging, feeds, and video, just as it pushes into AI generated content, synthetic social, AR glasses, and whatever flavor of metaverse Zuck still decides to throw its money at. But courts are signaling a pattern. They're willing to say, this is a monopoly, but they're very cautious about breaking up tech companies in the middle of an AI arms race with China. TikTok's forced sale deal is going to be used as rhetorical proof as Meta faces real competition, even though the US government is simultaneously trying to tame that competitor. But the next big front isn't just market power, it's going to be harm and what these products do to people, to democracy, to public health. That's where the 41 state lawsuit could bite, because this isn't about profits and shareholders, it's about people and child harm. Today, Meta gets a green light. For regulators, it's a red light. For the states, it's a huge warning. If you're going to take on a 20-ton gorilla, you better move faster than a 5-year case in a market that reinvents itself every 18 months. And if you really want to win, you need more than judges, you need public opinion on your side. That's it, more to come.